Marcus Thompson had always been a man who commanded respect. As the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, he was used to walking into rooms where people knew his name before he even introduced himself. His sharp suits, confident demeanor, and reputation for innovation preceded him wherever he went. But today, standing at Gate 32 of O'Hare International Airport, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Small. It wasn't just the crowded terminal or the long day ahead. It was the sinking feeling that no matter how far he'd come, some things never changed. It all started when Marcus handed over his boarding pass to the gate agent. He was scheduled to fly back home after delivering a keynote speech at a major tech conference in Chicago. The event had gone well. He'd received a standing ovation, shaken hands with industry leaders, and even signed a few lucrative deals on the sidelines. Now all he wanted was to relax in business class, enjoy a glass of wine, and catch up on emails during the 4-hour flight. The gate agent scanned his ticket but hesitated. She glanced up at him, then back down at her screen. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm sorry, but it seems there's been an issue with your reservation." Marcus frowned. "What kind of issue?" he asked politely, leaning slightly closer to see the monitor. "It appears your business class seat has been reassigned," she replied without looking at him directly. "We can offer you an economy seat instead." Marcus blinked, confused. "That's not possible. I booked this ticket months ago through my assistant. Everything was confirmed." He pulled out his phone and opened the email confirmation, showing it to her. Sure enough, the details clearly stated business class along with the booking reference number. The agent barely glanced at the screen. "I understand, sir, but our system shows otherwise. There must have been a mistake." Her voice carried a hint of finality, as if daring him to argue further. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather near the counter. Passengers waiting to board were watching the exchange curiously, though most tried to pretend they weren't eavesdropping. Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered bureaucratic hurdles, but something about this situation felt off. "Can we double-check the system?" he suggested, his tone still measured. "Maybe there's been a mix-up." The agent sighed dramatically, tapping away at her keyboard. After a moment, she shook her head. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. Economy is the best we can offer right now." Marcus felt a flicker of irritation. "Ma'am, I've traveled extensively and I've never experienced anything like this. Could you please escalate this to your supervisor?" At that, the agent's expression hardened. She called over a colleague, a man wearing a similar uniform, and explained the situation briefly. The second agent gave Marcus a cursory glance before nodding in agreement with his coworker. "Sir, I'm sorry, but unless you're willing to pay the difference for an upgrade, we can't accommodate you in business class." Pay the difference? Marcus almost laughed out loud. Here he was, presenting clear evidence of a paid reservation, and they were asking him to shell out more money for a seat he'd already purchased. It was absurd. Still, he kept his composure, knowing that losing his temper wouldn't solve anything. "I'll need to speak with someone higher up," Marcus said firmly. "This isn't acceptable." The two agents exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the male agent muttered something about checking with management and disappeared behind a door marked "Staff Only." Meanwhile, the original agent avoided making eye contact with Marcus altogether, busying herself with other passengers' tickets. As Marcus waited, he couldn't help but notice the murmurs around him. Some travelers whispered sympathetically, while others rolled their eyes, clearly annoyed by the delay. A middle-aged woman nearby leaned toward her companion and muttered, "Why doesn't he just take the economy seat and be done with it?" Marcus caught the comment and clenched his jaw. Was this really what people thought? That he should simply accept being treated unfairly because it was inconvenient to fight back? He reminded himself that these bystanders didn't know the full story. They didn't know how many times he'd faced moments like this throughout his life. Moments where his accomplishments were overlooked, his presence questioned, and his rights diminished, all because of the color of his skin. When the male agent returned a few minutes later, he brought bad news. "Sir, I spoke with management. And unfortunately, we cannot override the system. Your only option is to board an economy. Marcus stared at him, incredulous. So let me get this straight, he said slowly, enunciating each word. You're telling me that despite having a valid reservation, I'm being denied access to the service I paid for? The agent shrugged apologetically. That's correct. For a brief moment, Marcus considered giving in. He could have taken the economy seat, boarded the plane, and forgotten about the whole ordeal once he landed. But something inside him refused to budge. This wasn't just about a single flight, it was about principle. If he allowed himself to be pushed aside so easily, what message would that send? Would others continue to face the same treatment without question? No, Marcus said finally, his voice steady but firm. I won't accept that. Please cancel my reservation and refund my ticket. I'll find another way home. The agents looked surprised, perhaps expecting him to relent. But Marcus had made up his mind. As he stepped away from the counter, he felt a strange mix of anger and resolve bubbling within him. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Little did anyone know, Marcus Thompson was about to make a move that would shake the entire aviation industry to its core. By the time Marcus reached his car in the airport parking lot, the initial shock of what had happened had worn off, replaced by a simmering frustration. He sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly as he replayed the scene at Gate 32 over and over in his mind. It wasn't just about being denied access to business class. It was the dismissive tone of the agents, the lack of accountability, and the subtle undercurrent of disrespect that gnawed at him. For years, Marcus had prided himself on rising above such situations, chalking them up to isolated incidents or misunderstandings. But this time felt different. This time, it hit too close to home. As he drove back to his office downtown, Marcus decided to dig deeper. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to a group chat he shared with some of his closest friends and colleagues, other Black professionals who traveled frequently for work. The text was simple. Has anyone ever dealt with something like this at an airport? Let me know if you're free to talk. Within minutes, replies started pouring in. One friend, a marketing executive named Danielle, responded immediately. Are you serious? Happens all the time, she wrote. Last month I got bumped from first class even though I had a confirmed ticket. They said there was an error. Yeah, right. Another colleague, Jamal, chimed in with a similar story. I've been downgraded twice in 6 months. Both times they acted like it was no big deal. Like we should just be grateful to fly at all. Marcus scrolled through the messages, his heart sinking with each new account. What he thought might have been a one-off incident was clearly part of a pattern, a disturbing trend that seemed to target people who looked like him. It wasn't just airlines, it was hotels, rental car companies, restaurants, all industries where racial bias often lurked beneath the surface. Each story shared by his peers added fuel to the fire burning inside him. This wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about systemic discrimination, plain and simple. When Marcus arrived at his office, he called Danielle and Jamal for a video meeting. As the three of them connected online, the conversation quickly turned intense. They swapped stories, venting their frustrations about everything from rude gate agents to outright hostility during travel. Danielle recounted how she'd once been asked to produce multiple forms of ID before boarding a flight, while other passengers walked past her without so much as a second glance. Jamal described being singled out for extra security checks more times than he could count, despite flying regularly for nearly a decade. But here's the thing, Danielle said, leaning closer to her camera. It's not just about us. Think about all the people who don't have our platform or resources, people who can't afford lawyers or PR teams to fight back. What happens to them? Her words struck a chord with Marcus. He realized that this wasn't just a personal affront, it was a societal issue. And yet, whenever these stories surfaced, they were often dismissed as anomalies or blamed on individual employees rather than the institutions themselves. Airlines issued generic apologies when caught, promising to look into the matter, but nothing ever changed. The cycle continued, perpetuating a culture of inequality that left countless travelers feeling invisible and undervalued. As the discussion went on, Marcus began to feel a shift within himself. For years, he'd built his career on creating cutting-edge technology designed to solve problems. Whether it was streamlining supply chains or improving customer experiences, his company thrived on innovation. So why couldn't he apply that same mindset to this problem? Why couldn't he disrupt the very industry that had failed him and so many others? "I'm done playing victim," Marcus said suddenly, interrupting Danielle mid-sentence. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus continued, his voice growing firmer, "that instead of complaining or filing lawsuits, I want to do something bigger, something that forces the entire system to change." Jamal chuckled nervously. "You're talking about starting your own airline, aren't you?" Marcus didn't laugh. "Exactly." There was a long pause, as Danielle and Jamal exchanged skeptical glances. Finally, Danielle spoke up. "Okay, hear me out. Starting an airline is, well, it's insane. Do you know how much money that takes, how much red tape you'd have to cut through, not to mention competing against giants like Delta and United?" "I get it," Marcus replied calmly. "But think about it. If we could, create an airline that actually prioritizes inclusivity and respect. If we could prove that it's possible to run a profitable business while treating every passenger equally, wouldn't that send a message? Wouldn't that force the rest of the industry to wake up?" Danielle sighed, shaking her head. "It's ambitious, I'll give you that. But ambition isn't enough. You'd need investors, partners, planes. The list goes on." "That's true," Marcus admitted. "But I also have connections. And if I frame this as more than just a business venture, if I position it as a movement, people will listen. Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I am saying it's necessary." The room fell silent as Danielle and Jamal absorbed his words. Finally, Jamal nodded slowly. "All right, man. Let's say you go through with this. What's the first step?" Marcus smiled, a spark of determination lighting up his face. "Research. Lots of it. I need to understand exactly what's broken in the current system and how we can fix it. Then I'll start building a team. This isn't just my fight anymore, it's ours." Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into the project with relentless energy. He spent hours poring over reports about racial bias in air travel, analyzing data on passenger complaints, and studying the inner workings of major airlines. He reached out to experts in aviation law, logistics, and customer service, seeking advice and insights. Slowly but surely, a vision began to take shape in his mind. An airline unlike any other, one that would redefine what it meant to travel with dignity. One evening, as Marcus sat alone in his office sketching ideas on a whiteboard, he realized something profound. This wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. It was about creating a legacy rooted in fairness, empathy, and opportunity. If he succeeded, he wouldn't just be challenging an industry. He'd be inspiring a generation to demand better. And that, he thought, was worth every ounce of effort he could muster. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. His mind was buzzing with ideas, plans, and possibilities. For the first time in days, the frustration that had weighed him down was replaced by a sense of purpose. He knew what he had to do. It wasn't going to be easy. Nothing groundbreaking ever was. But he was ready to take on the challenge. This wasn't just about creating another airline, it was about building something revolutionary, something that would force the world to pay attention. Marcus started by assembling a team. He reached out to some of the brightest minds he knew, engineers, designers, marketing experts, and even activists who had spent their careers fighting for equality. He didn't just want people with technical expertise. He needed visionaries who understood the deeper mission behind this project. Over Zoom calls and brainstorming sessions, Marcus laid out his plan. "We're not just starting an airline," he told them during one of their early meetings. "We're starting a movement. An airline that doesn't just transport people from point A to point B, but treats every single passenger with respect and dignity, no matter who they are, where they come from, or how much money they have." His Words resonated deeply with the group. Many of them had experienced similar forms of discrimination in their own lives. They weren't just signing up for a job, they were joining a cause. Together, they began sketching out the blueprint for what would become Sky Equity. One of the first things Marcus focused on was transparency. He hated how traditional airlines hid fees, changed policies without notice, and made travelers feel powerless. With Sky Equity, every aspect of the booking process would be crystal clear. Prices would include all taxes and charges up front, so passengers wouldn't have to deal with unpleasant surprises at checkout. There would be no hidden fees for baggage, seat selection, or snacks. Everything would be straightforward, honest, and fair. But Marcus wanted to go beyond pricing. He envisioned an airline that prioritized comfort and accessibility for everyone. That meant designing cabins with wider seats, more legroom, and adjustable lighting to accommodate different needs. He hired a team of ergonomic specialists to ensure that even economy-class seating would rival the standards of most airlines' premium offerings. For families traveling with children, there would be dedicated play areas and quiet zones. Passengers with disabilities would find ramps, spacious restrooms, and staff trained to assist them respectfully and efficiently. Technology played a huge role in Marcus's vision. He imagined an app that would allow passengers to customize nearly every aspect of their journey. Want a vegan meal? Done. Need extra assistance boarding? No problem. Prefer a window seat away from noise? Consider it handled. The app would also provide real-time updates on flight status, gate changes, and delays, eliminating the stress of uncertainty. Every detail was designed to make flying less of a chore and more of an experience. Of course, none of this would matter if the staff didn't embody the values of the company. Marcus knew that training employees to treat passengers with kindness and respect was crucial. He partnered with diversity consultants to develop comprehensive programs that addressed unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and conflict resolution. From pilots to flight attendants to ground crew, every member of the Sky Equity team would undergo rigorous training to ensure they represented the airline's mission. As the planning progressed, Marcus faced skepticism from outsiders. Industry veterans warned him that competing against established giants like Delta, United, and American Airlines would be nearly impossible. Others questioned whether customers would trust a new player in such a highly regulated and competitive field. But Marcus brushed off the doubters. He believed that if you built something truly remarkable, people would flock to it. To fund the venture, Marcus turned to crowdfunding. He launched a campaign on a popular platform, sharing his story and explaining the mission behind Sky Equity. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, donations poured in from supporters around the world. Some gave small amounts, while others pledged thousands. Celebrities, influencers, and activists amplified the message, spreading the word far and wide. By the end of the first week, the campaign had raised millions. Not just enough to get started, but enough to send a powerful statement. The world was hungry for change. Marcus also secured investments from high-profile figures in tech, entertainment, and finance. These weren't just wealthy individuals looking to make a profit. They were allies who shared his vision. One investor, a renowned filmmaker named Ava Monroe, summed it up perfectly during a press conference. "Marcus isn't just launching an airline," she said. "He's rewriting the rules of an industry that has ignored inequality for too long, and we're proud to stand with him." With funding secured, Marcus shifted his focus to branding. He wanted Sky Equity to feel modern, inclusive, and aspirational. The logo, a sleek, minimalist design featuring a rising sun, symbolized hope and progress. The tagline, "Fly with Dignity," captured the essence of the company's mission. Marketing campaigns highlighted stories of real people who had faced discrimination while traveling, turning their struggles into a rallying cry for change. Behind the scenes, Marcus worked tirelessly to bring the dream to life. He negotiated deals with manufacturers to build a fleet of state-of-the-art aircraft equipped with eco-friendly engines and advanced safety features. He partnered with local communities to create job opportunities and mentorship programs for underrepresented groups in aviation. He even collaborated with artists to design the interiors of the planes, ensuring that every element, from the color palette to the upholstery, reflected warmth and inclusivity. As the launch date approached, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Social media buzzed with excitement as teasers for SkyEquity went viral. Travel bloggers wrote glowing articles about the upcoming airline, praising its innovative approach and bold commitment to equity. News outlets covered the story extensively, framing it as a potential game-changer for the industry. Even competitors took notice, though many dismissed it as a fleeting trend. Through it all, Marcus remained focused. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but he was determined to see it through. This wasn't just about proving a point, it was about showing the world that businesses could and should do better. When the first SkyEquity plane finally rolled out of the hangar, emblazoned with the company's iconic logo, Marcus stood beside it, surrounded by his team. As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, he smiled confidently. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "We're here to show that travel can be more than just a transaction. It can be a celebration of humanity, a reminder that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Welcome to SkyEquity." The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus barely heard it. In that moment, he knew he had done more than start an airline. He had ignited a spark, one that had the power to transform an entire industry, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The day SkyEquity officially launched its first flight was nothing short of historic. Marcus stood on the tarmac, watching as the gleaming aircraft, dubbed Equity 1, was prepped for takeoff. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the scene. Dozens of reporters, photographers, and well-wishers crowded around, eager to witness what many were calling the dawn of a new era in air travel. For Marcus, it wasn't just about the plane leaving the ground. It was about proving that change was possible. Inside the terminal, passengers checked in at sleek, futuristic kiosks designed to streamline the boarding process. Gone were the long lines and confusing procedures that often frustrated travelers. Instead, each step had been carefully thought out to minimize stress and maximize efficiency. Staff members greeted passengers warmly, addressing them by name when possible, thanks to the app's integration with check-in systems. Even the smallest details, like complimentary refreshments and soothing ambient music, were intended to make people feel valued from the moment they arrived. As the boarding process began, Marcus took his place near the gate, observing quietly. He wanted to see firsthand how everything would unfold. Would the systems work seamlessly? Would passengers notice the difference? Most importantly, would they leave feeling like they'd experienced something special? One by one, travelers made their way onto the plane. Among them was a young mother juggling two toddlers, an elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and a college student heading home for the holidays. Each passenger had been chosen not just because they booked early, but because their stories represented the diversity SkyEquity aimed to serve. Marcus had personally invited some of them to share their experiences publicly after the flight, hoping their testimonials would inspire others to believe in the airline's mission. Once everyone was seated, Marcus stepped aboard to deliver a brief welcome speech. Standing near the cockpit, he scanned the faces of the passengers, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "Thank you all for being part of this incredible journey," he began, his voice carrying through the cabin. "Today isn't just about flying from one destination to another. It's about showing the world that travel can be inclusive, respectful, and empowering for everyone. Whether you're sitting in economy or premium class, I want you to know that we see you, we value you, and we're committed to making sure your experience reflects that." Applause broke out, spontaneous and heartfelt. Marcus smiled before stepping aside to let the crew take over. As the plane taxied down the runway, he couldn't help but think back to the countless late nights, endless meetings, and moments of doubt that had led to this point. It hadn't been easy, but seeing the joy on people's faces made it all worthwhile. Meanwhile, outside the aviation world, SkyEquity's launch sent shockwaves through the industry. Major airlines scrambled to respond, issuing press releases, highlighting their own initiatives for diversity and inclusion. Some even announced plans to improve customer service or introduce more transparent pricing models. But Marcus knew these gestures were largely superficial. an attempt to deflect attention rather than address the root issues. Still, he welcomed the conversation. If his actions forced competitors to rethink their practices, even slightly, then Sky Equity was already succeeding. Back inside Equity One, the flight unfolded smoothly. Passengers marveled at the spacious seating, the quiet hum of the engines, and the attentive service provided by the crew. Meals were served promptly, featuring locally sourced ingredients and options catering to various dietary preferences. Entertainment screens displayed documentaries about cultures from around the world, reinforcing the theme of inclusivity. Even the bathrooms were stocked with eco-friendly products, reflecting the airline's commitment to sustainability. By the time the plane touched down at its destination, the mood aboard was electric. Passengers disembarked with smiles, many stopping to thank the crew or snap photos of the aircraft. Social media lit up with glowing reviews, hashtags like "Fly with Dignity" trending globally within hours. Journalists covering the event described it as a masterclass in customer experience and a bold step toward equity in travel. But Marcus wasn't satisfied yet. Launching the airline was only phase one. Now came the hard part, scaling the operation while staying true to its values. Over the next few months, he threw himself into expanding Sky Equity's reach. New routes were added, connecting underserved communities to major cities. Partnerships were formed with local businesses to boost economic growth in areas historically overlooked by mainstream airlines. Marcus also established a foundation dedicated to providing scholarships and training programs for aspiring pilots, mechanics, and aviation professionals from marginalized backgrounds. Despite the success, challenges inevitably arose. Critics accused Sky Equity of being too idealistic, claiming it couldn't sustain itself financially without compromising its principles. Others dismissed it as a fad, predicting it would fade once the initial hype died down. Even some employees struggled to adapt to the company's high standards, finding the rigorous training and accountability measures daunting. Marcus faced these obstacles head-on. He held town hall meetings with staff, listening to their concerns and offering guidance. When financial analysts questioned the feasibility of his business model, he pointed to the growing demand for ethical companies and the loyalty of Sky Equity, Sky's customer base. Every setback became an opportunity to refine the vision, proving that resilience was key to lasting impact. Perhaps the most rewarding aspect of Sky Equity's growth was the ripple effect it created. Inspired by the airline's success, other industries began examining their own practices. Hotels started implementing bias training for front desk staff. Ride-sharing apps introduced features allowing users to rate drivers based on inclusivity. Even retail chains took note, pledging to diversify their leadership teams and marketing campaigns. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded. He never lost sight of why he had started this journey, to ensure no one else would have to endure the humiliation he'd faced at Gate 32. Whenever doubts crept in, he reminded himself of the stories shared by passengers who felt seen and respected for the first time in their travels. Those moments kept him going, fueling his determination to keep pushing forward. As Sky Equity prepared to celebrate its first anniversary, Marcus reflected on how far they'd come. From a single discriminatory incident at an airport gate to a global movement redefining air travel, the transformation had been extraordinary. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, not just in aviation but across society as a whole. And if Sky Equity could inspire others to join the fight for equality, then its impact would stretch far beyond the skies. For Marcus Thompson, this wasn't just about running an airline anymore. It was about building a better future, one flight at a time. By the time Sky Equity celebrated its second year in operation, it had become more than just an airline. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and change. The company's rapid growth defied expectations, earning praise not only for its innovative approach to travel but also for its unwavering commitment to equity and inclusion. Marcus Thompson, once dismissed as overly ambitious or naive, now stood at the forefront of a movement that was reshaping the aviation industry and challenging societal norms along the way. But Marcus wasn't content to rest on his laurels. He knew that true progress required constant vigilance and accountability. It wasn't enough to simply create a better airline. He wanted to expose the systemic issues that plagued the broader industry and hold those responsible accountable. And so, while Sky Equity continued to expand its fleet and routes, Marcus launched a bold PR campaign aimed directly at the airlines that had ignored complaints like his for years. The cornerstone of this campaign was a documentary series titled Above the Clouds. Produced in collaboration with award-winning filmmakers, the project delved into the hidden world of discrimination in air travel. Each episode featured real stories from passengers who had faced bias, profiling, or outright hostility during their journeys. Some recounted being removed from flights without explanation. Others described being subjected to invasive security checks based solely on their appearance. And many shared how they felt invisible to airline staff despite paying for premium services. One particularly powerful episode focused on a family of 4, a black father, mother, and their 2 young children, who were denied boarding because the airline claimed their tickets were invalid. After hours of arguing with customer service representatives, it turned out the issue stemmed from a glitch in the system, one that affected multiple passengers that day. Yet instead of addressing the problem promptly, the airline staff treated the family with suspicion, questioning whether they had forged their documents. By the time the misunderstanding was resolved, the family had missed their flight and spent nearly 6 hours stranded in the terminal with no apology or compensation. Another episode highlighted the experiences of Muslim travelers who reported being singled out for additional scrutiny due to their religious attire or names. One woman tearfully recounted how she was forced to remove her hijab in front of male security officers after setting off a metal detector, despite offering alternative ways to verify her identity. Her story resonated deeply with viewers, sparking outrage and calls for reform within airport security protocols. What made Above the Clouds so impactful was its unflinching honesty. Unlike sanitized corporate apologies or vague promises of improvement, the series laid bare the human cost of systemic bias. Viewers weren't just hearing statistics or reading headlines. They were seeing faces, hearing voices, and feeling emotions. The result was a groundswell of public support for Sky Equity's mission, as well as increased pressure on traditional airlines to address these long-standing issues. Major carriers initially tried to downplay the documentary, dismissing it as sensationalized or one-sided. But when clips from the series went viral on social media, accompanied by hashtags like #TAWIS, Travel with Respect, and End Bias in Air Travel, the backlash became impossible to ignore. Passengers began sharing their own stories online, flooding review platforms with accounts of mistreatment. Consumer advocacy groups seized the opportunity to file formal complaints against airlines accused of discriminatory practices, prompting investigations by regulatory bodies. Some companies attempted to respond with superficial changes, such as launching diversity training programs or issuing generic statements about inclusivity. However, these efforts often rang hollow, lacking the depth and authenticity that Sky Equity embodied. In contrast, Marcus doubled down on transparency, inviting journalists and influencers to tour his facilities and meet the employees who brought the airline's values to life every day. He also introduced a public accountability dashboard on Sky Equity's website, where customers could track metrics like passenger satisfaction rates, diversity hiring goals, and carbon emissions reductions. This level of openness set a new standard for corporate responsibility, leaving competitors scrambling to catch up. As the industry grappled with the fallout from Above the Clouds, Marcus seized the moment to push for systemic reforms beyond individual airlines. He partnered with civil rights organizations, policymakers, and academics to draft a comprehensive framework for equitable air travel. Dubbed the Equitable Skies Initiative, the proposal included recommendations for standardized anti-discrimination policies, improved data collection on passenger demographics, and independent oversight boards to investigate complaints. Marcus presented the plan at a global aviation summit, urging leaders to adopt it as a universal standard. To his surprise and relief, many attendees responded positively. While some executives remained resistant, others acknowledged the need for change. recognizing that public trust in the industry was at an all-time low. Slowly but surely, pieces of the Equitable Skies initiative began to take shape, with several airlines pledging to implement key components. For Marcus, this marked a turning point, not just for Sky Equity, but for the entire sector. Yet even as the tide shifted, Marcus refused to let complacency creep in. He understood that meaningful change took time, effort, and sustained commitment. To ensure Sky Equity stayed ahead of the curve, he invested heavily in research and development, exploring cutting-edge technologies that could further enhance the passenger experience. Artificial intelligence algorithms were developed to detect patterns of bias in customer interactions, while virtual reality simulations trained staff to handle difficult situations with empathy and professionalism. Every innovation was guided by the same principle: putting people first. At the same time, Marcus expanded Sky Equity's impact beyond air travel. Recognizing that discrimination didn't stop at the airport gate, he launched partnerships with hotels, rental car companies, and tourism boards to promote inclusive practices across the hospitality industry. Together, they created certification programs for businesses committed to equity, offering incentives like discounted advertising rates and priority listings on travel booking platforms. These collaborations helped amplify the message that dignity and respect should be non-negotiable, regardless of where someone chose to go. Despite the mounting successes, Marcus never lost sight of the human element driving everything forward. He made it a point to personally engage with passengers whenever possible, listening to feedback and learning from their experiences. On one occasion, he met a teenage girl traveling alone for the first time to attend a robotics competition. She shyly admitted that she'd been nervous about flying but felt reassured by the kindness of the Sky Equity crew. Hearing her story reminded Marcus why he had started this journey in the first place: to make sure everyone, no matter their background, felt safe and valued. As the third anniversary of Sky Equity approached, Marcus reflected on how far the company, and the world, had come. What began as a personal affront at an airport gate had transformed into a global crusade for justice and equality. Traditional airlines, once dismissive of concerns about bias, were now actively working to improve their practices. Governments and regulatory bodies were implementing stricter guidelines to protect travelers' rights. And most importantly, countless individuals who had long felt marginalized were finally being heard. For Marcus, the ultimate measure of success wasn't market share or profit margins. It was the knowledge that he had sparked a conversation that couldn't be silenced. By refusing to accept the status quo, he had shown that courage and conviction could inspire real change. And though there was still much work to be done, he knew that the seeds of transformation had been planted. Looking ahead, Marcus envisioned a future where air travel was synonymous with dignity and fairness, a future where no one would ever have to question whether they belonged in business class or any other space. With each flight Sky Equity operated, that vision grew closer to reality. As Marcus boarded Equity One for yet another milestone journey, he smiled to himself, knowing that the sky was no longer the limit. It was just the beginning. By the time Sky Equity entered its fifth year, it had cemented itself as more than just an airline. It was a cultural phenomenon. The company's influence extended far beyond aviation, sparking conversations about equity and inclusion in industries ranging from hospitality to healthcare. Marcus Thompson, once a frustrated traveler wronged by systemic bias, had become a global icon for change. Yet what truly set him apart wasn't his success. It was the legacy he was building, one rooted not in profit or power, but in humanity. The impact of Sky Equity was undeniable. Its innovative business model proved that profitability and purpose could coexist. The airline consistently outperformed competitors in customer satisfaction surveys, earning accolades for its service, transparency, and commitment to diversity. Passengers weren't just loyal because of the comfortable seats or affordable prices. They stayed because they felt seen, respected, and valued. For many, flying with Sky Equity wasn't just transportation. It was validation that their dignity mattered. But Marcus knew that true transformation couldn't be measured solely by revenue reports or passenger numbers. He often reminded himself, and his team, that the ultimate goal was to create lasting change. This meant ensuring that Sky Equity's mission lived on long after the planes landed. To achieve this, Marcus focused on three pillars: education, empowerment, and advocacy. Education, inspiring the next generation. One of Marcus's proudest achievements was the launch of the Sky Equity Academy, a training program designed to bring underrepresented groups into the aviation industry. From aspiring pilots and engineers to flight attendants and ground crew members, the Academy offered scholarships, mentorship opportunities, and hands-on experience to thousands of students worldwide. The curriculum went beyond technical skills, emphasizing leadership, cultural sensitivity, and ethical decision-making. Graduates of the program didn't just learn how to operate aircraft, they learned how to lead with integrity and empathy. Many alumni went on to work for Sky Equity, while others joined rival airlines, spreading the values they'd absorbed throughout the industry. Marcus also partnered with schools and community organizations to introduce aviation-themed STEM programs for children. These initiatives aim to inspire young minds, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, to dream big and consider careers in aviation. Watching kids light up during field trips to Sky Equity hangars or hearing them talk excitedly about becoming pilots filled Marcus with hope. He believed that representation mattered, and seeing people who looked like them succeeding in aviation would encourage future generations to break barriers. Empowerment. Investing in communities beyond its workforce, Sky Equity made a conscious effort to uplift the communities it served. Marcus understood that air travel connected people to opportunities, jobs, education, healthcare, but recognized that not everyone had equal access to these connections. In response, he launched the Wings of Opportunity Fund, which provided grants to grassroots organizations working to improve economic mobility in underserved areas. For example, the fund supported projects like building better infrastructure near rural airports, funding entrepreneurship programs for women and minorities, and even subsidizing flights for low-income families visiting loved ones during emergencies. One particularly impactful initiative helped migrant workers reunite with their families across borders by offering discounted tickets and flexible scheduling options. Marcus also ensured that Sky Equity reinvested a significant portion of its profits back into local economies along its routes. This included sourcing food and beverages from nearby farms, hiring locally whenever possible, and sponsoring events that celebrated regional cultures. By doing so, the airline became more than a transient presence. It became a partner in progress. Advocacy. Holding systems accountable. While Sky Equity thrived, Marcus never stopped advocating for broader reforms. He used his platform to push for policy changes at both national and international levels, urging governments to hold airlines accountable for discriminatory practices. His efforts contributed to the establishment of independent oversight bodies, tasked with investigating passenger complaints and enforcing stricter anti-bias regulations. At the same time, Marcus encouraged corporations outside aviation to adopt similar principles of inclusivity. Through speaking engagements, workshops, and partnerships, he shared Sky Equity's playbook with leaders in tech, finance, retail, and beyond. Many took note, implementing initiatives inspired by his vision. For instance, a major hotel chain introduced mandatory bias training for all employees, while a ride-sharing app launched a feature allowing passengers to rate drivers based on inclusivity. What struck Marcus most was the ripple effect of his actions. Companies that might have ignored issues of inequality before were now forced to confront them head-on, not because of legal requirements but because consumers demanded it. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying these demands, with hashtags like #respect in travel and dignity for all keeping the conversation alive. Every story shared, every voice raised, brought society one step closer to real equity. Reflection. A movement beyond one man. Marcus stood on stage during Sky Equity's 5th anniversary celebration, surrounded by cheering employees, passengers, and supporters. He felt overwhelming gratitude. It wasn't just pride in what he had built, it was awe at what others had achieved alongside him. The movement had grown far beyond one man's quest for justice. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe in a better world. In his speech that evening, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "When I started Sky Equity, I thought I was fighting for myself," he admitted. "I wanted to prove that no one should be treated differently because of the color of their skin or the texture of their hair. But over time, I realized this. Fight isn't mine alone. It's ours. Together we've shown that it's possible to build businesses that don't just serve shareholders, but serve humanity." He paused, scanning the crowd. "This isn't the end of the road. There's still so much work to do. In aviation, yes, but also in every corner of our lives. We've proven that when we stand together, we can challenge systems, rewrite rules, and redefine what's possible. So let's keep going. Let's keep dreaming bigger, reaching higher, and demanding better, for ourselves and for each other." The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Among them were passengers, whose lives had been changed by Sky Equity, employees who found purpose in its mission, and activists inspired by its example. They represented a tapestry of stories, struggles, and triumphs, all united by a shared belief in the power of dignity and respect. Looking ahead, a legacy that endures. Though Marcus eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on mentoring the next generation of leaders, his influence remained palpable. Under new management, Sky Equity continued to innovate, expanding its fleet routes and initiatives while staying true to its founding principles. Meanwhile, Marcus dedicated himself to writing, speaking, and advising organizations committed to driving social change. His memoir, titled Above the Clouds, Building Equity One Flight at a Time, became an instant bestseller. In it, he chronicled his experiences, lessons learned, and hopes for the future. Proceeds from the book funded scholarships and community projects, ensuring that his legacy would endure long after he retired. Years later, historians would look back on Marcus Thompson's life as a turning point, a moment when one man's refusal to accept injustice sparked a global movement. Airports, once symbols of exclusion for many, began to transform into spaces of belonging. Airlines adopted policies modeled after Sky Equity's standards, prioritizing fairness and compassion. And countless individuals, inspired by Marcus's courage, found the strength to demand better treatment in their own lives. For Marcus, success wasn't defined by awards or accolades. It was knowing that he had helped create a world where everyone could take to the skies, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually, where dignity wasn't negotiable, where respect wasn't optional, and where equity wasn't a distant dream but a tangible reality. As he watched another Sky Equity plane ascend into the horizon, Marcus smiled softly. The journey had been long, challenging, and rewarding in ways he never imagined. But one thing was certain: the sky was no longer the limit, it was just the beginning.